What's up, guys? Today I'm bringing you the first Q&A of 2023. Let's keep crushing all our fitness goals and being more than resolutioners. The grind never stops. This is simply a continuation of what was already in the process. The process of being in this game for the rest of our lives, because who wants to lose what we work so hard to obtain? Getting bigger, stronger, smarter. We keep pressing forward, and I know that you can do it. Set realistic yet tough goals. Level up, never settle. You know you're capable of more. That's what I'll be doing. Competing, bringing you my best yet, not only in terms of content creation, but also physically. We don't stop. We can't stop. This is the gym lifestyle, and the Natty community is on the right path. All right? Consistency is number one. So if you have any questions, post them down below, and let's keep building together. First question: how to deal with unstable shoulders as well as keeping your shoulders retracted throughout the entire range of motion. I don't want long-term discomfort, even though that's the only form that suits my body. Much love. What you're probably referring to is the scapulohumeral rhythm, where if you let your scaps naturally move, not even think about retraction or protraction, just press, everything will be automatically sorted out. Yet you've tried that form and it somehow doesn't feel right for you. There is discomfort in the shoulders. And so you went back to retraction. It feels pretty good, but you're concerned of having injuries in the long term. And maybe right now you're not the most stable in that position. Okay. That's a great question. And the first thing I'll say is you got to separate the theoretical from the practical. And even though on paper we can point out and say, yeah, maybe you shouldn't retract, in the real world, what are the best bench pressers on planet Earth doing? 100% of them trying to lift the most amount of weight while being safe in the process, minimizing injuries. It's powerlifters who maintain some degree of retraction or at least depression. But not all of them hold that retraction. Sometimes you will see retraction and protraction, which mostly has to do with the size of the rib cage and arm length. So the first thing I'm going to tell you is to try both. It doesn't have to be one over the other, that you're only flat like this, like what you see in typical gyms, or only staying maximally retracted. Personally, I can go either way. I don't have any pain regardless, but my favorite is retract, protract. My least favorite is the old school way of only being tight, especially when you go on to do Larson presses or calisthenics, where now you actually have to protract. So there's a sport specificity aspect to this as well that goes beyond just lifting in the bench. And keep in mind, depending on which angle you're at, sometimes you may want to retract. Like I found that on the 45 degree, it feels better if I include a little bit of it compared to the 30 where it can be more flat. Individual differences that you'll discover in the long term, but that's my first tip. Secondly, if you don't like this form, it still feels off, and you insist, I'm going to keep retraction at all times, then maybe you don't have to lock out your elbows. Like, what's your goals? You didn't really specify, but if it's for hypertrophy, it's really the lockout that kind of forces a natural protraction. So if you get shy of that, just doing lengthened partials, which now have been shown to be just as effective for hypertrophy. So just the bottom range, leave a slight bend. This is for pure pec hypertrophy. You will have a weaker bench press in the long term, and your triceps won't grow as well, but your pecs are going to grow like weeds. Do that kind of form, treating the bench for that purpose, and now you can hold retraction for days. Like, no matter how fatigued you are, you're not going to have that tendency to want to get out of that position. So that should maximize your stability. And then to compound this, you want to do a tremendous amount of rows. Back in the day, guys recommended twice the rowing volume compared to pressing. I don't think that's realistic for most unless you're doing rows on your off days. So you got a band set up, you're attaching it to a chair or couch or whatever. Just pumping, getting some volume in there. Or every time you go to a gym, let's say it's 5 days a week, even if it's not a back day or an upper day, you're still including some rows. And what a lot of powerlifters have done is doing rows on the lower body days. So they can do non-chest supported rows as a deadlift accessory and then chest supported rows as a bench accessory. Makes sense? And then the form itself, you'll want to mimic the bench press elbow path. So if using thumb and waist distance, rather vertical forearms, you're going to be at around a 45-degree angle. So row right about here, not here, okay? Which is also going to bias the rear deltoids, which are arguably very important for the bench press. And then going back to the rows, watch my recent video on my favorite cable row. Extremely underrated, and people don't want to do it because you got your legs spread open and you're lying down on a bench. I get it, there's a social stigma, but it works. And it's the most specific rowing accessory to your bench. You want to know how to stay tight in the bottom? That'll do it for you. And then finally, consider switching your bench. If it's adjustable, there might be some lateral instability, especially in commercial gyms where they tend to not be of the highest quality. So flat typically will be more stable. And in a perfect world, you would be on a bench that is at least 12 inches wide, adhering to competition standards. Fat pad being the most preferable. That's what a lot of athletes are going to use. I used to have one, used it for years. It was the best bench ever in terms of flat position. That's going to help in keeping that tightness. Otherwise, not much else for me to say. It's a simple problem with a simple solution. And at the end of the day, you got to listen to your body. Hey Alex, want to ask if upper lower split is better in push-pull legs. Depends. I know guys hate that response, but it's the truth. Are you willing to go to the gym 6 days a week to get twice a week muscle protein synthesis? The same volume as an upper lower. That's up for you to decide. Maybe your fatigue is lower on a session per session basis. Perhaps you like being in and out of the gym in 45 minutes rather than having slightly longer workouts because you're combining the press and the pulls. Maybe you don't like supersets if you're trying to be efficient with an upper sit-up. So doing weighted dips immediately followed by weighted pull-ups. Maybe your accessories towards the end are half-assed on upper lower, whereas the push-pull segment is always great. The curls and the tricep work, never any compromise. I don't know your current circumstances or scheduling or goals, but what I could say is the gains will be rather comparable, if not identical, provided that you match all the parameters. If your volume is equated, intensity is on point, you can handle either setup, then it's simply a matter of personal preference. That said, I'm personally not a fan of the traditional push-pull legs just because I find it inefficient. Like, who wants to go to gym 6 days a week for twice a week muscle protein synthesis? I find that's a bit extreme. I'd rather use that time to do other activities. Not to mention the fact that there's always that continuity. There's never a break. So this fatigue from day to day is accumulating. And even though it's not the same muscles, it's the same nervous system. Your body has this sensation of being tired. That said, if you kind of like both and you're having trouble deciding which to pick, why not choose a hybridized routine? So be upper, lower, off, push-pull legs, off, repeat, or vice versa. At least now, work capacity will not be an issue for the upper segment. So if there was any trace of laziness whatsoever, it's obliterated in the push-pull. Legs, that never changed. And you have one less day in the gym. Same frequency, right? Slightly more recovery. Heck, you can even do antagonist supersets on the upper day. Not even isolate at the very end. Hit an arm day the next day, or your arm accessories on the lower day. You know? You can mix and match it in so many different ways. I'm not even going to attempt to confuse you. You can figure out the rest for yourself. But that's hands down the best alternative between the two. Alex, when would you recommend starting weighted calisthenics? And also, would it be better to gain normal weight or get a weighted vest? There's many ways to answer this. You can argue that once you can do over 30 reps of any basic movement, that you're not really getting much out of it. So the next step is to make the exercise harder. So in the case of bodyweight push-ups, if you're just high repping it, the hypertrophy outcomes are not equated. That's what the research says. And anecdotally, just look around. The guys who really excel at that endurance type of shit aren't the biggest. So you would then move on to pseudo planche push-ups or diamond push-ups or feet elevated, and you keep working your way up all through the progressions. You master everything. Maybe you incorporate skill work if you so desire. Like, there's levels to this. Levels that can quite literally take you years. Not even exaggerating. Years and years of bodyweight mastery if you choose to get to that point. But most are impatient. They want to get into weighted calisthenics right off the bat. And I understand that. So, what's the bare minimum? In my opinion, 30 push-ups, 15 to 20 dips, and 10 to 12 pull-ups. After which, a weight vest could be a good idea, but not really in the sense that it's extremely expensive for what you get. And it tends to not go above, say, 45 pounds or so, which could be good on some select movements where you cannot have a weight belt hanging off of you, like for pistol squats, sissy squats, weighted push-ups, though you can use a backpack for that, isolation work, extensions, ring curls. There's a lot of applications where it's useful, but your best option is to go straight into buying a dipping belt. And it's usually going to come with a chain, so you can just clip it onto your plates, you're good to go. Then if you want to go beyond, you get a loading pin, it's even faster. And now you can work within the 5-day rep range. And that's low enough to start getting stronger. And then you asked me about weight gain. I don't view this as a separate task. In my opinion, and I'm going to be talking about this soon in an upcoming video entitled Why Calisthenics Failed You. If you're not bulking, you're leaving gains on the table. Yes, your relative strength will not be on point. Your display is 100% guaranteed to be subpar. No question about it. But for bodybuilding, trying to put on muscle, who in the actual cares if your leverages are not the best? The way that I see it, you're getting more out of less weight. And it's like having a free weighted vest on. So if you went from 30 pull-ups because you were shredded to hitting 20 at a heavier body weight, does that change anything for building muscle? Nope. Actually, that's not true. We can potentially argue it's more efficient because now there's less lactic acid buildup and fatigue. So you can now go back to more basic variations. The exercise that you use as a novice. Like, isn't it hypocritical that many talk trash about main gaining for lifting purposes, but the moment you're doing a closed chain exercise, it's fine? Because look at some select street lifters. Okay, I get it that they got to be competitive for their sport, but what's optimal? A caloric surplus. Period. It's the most anabolic, you're going to have the best recovery, and once you cut down back to that lower body weight, you're going to have PRs galore. So calisthenics is one of those few activities where on the way down, you're probably going to get stronger. So to me, where's the negatives? There's very little other than the fact that you won't look the best as aesthetic. But for pure muscle gains, yeah, calorie surplus, weighted calisthenics, and doing harder variations of the easier stuff. This way you're not getting 30 plus reps. That's how you build all kinds of muscle. Hey Alex, what are your thoughts on running the max effort method in the 3-week wave a couple times before swapping the wave? So you're still changing the lift weekly, but for only 3 weeks. Then after 2 or 3 cycles, you can change the 3-week wave with 3 new movements. So you get to hit the same lift every 3 weeks, but for only 2 or 3 cycles. That's a disadvantage. It sounds to me like you don't trust the max effort method. Because if you're constantly rotating like that, what I can guarantee is that you will suffer from more overuse problems. We're talking about a 100% grind. The exact method that's been criticized so heavily in the raw powerlifting community. Obviously, fraudulent. People who have zero understanding of the conjugate system, as I have proven time and time again. But what they are correct about, fact, is that you can't use the same variation on a frequent basis. That is what causes injuries when maxing out. It is precisely why gym bros who do the same bench press every other week end up getting hurt. It's why I don't get hurt, because I will go months at a time without repeating the same movement. The thing is, you have to accept the fact that we're not doing this for specificity. It doesn't matter. What we're training is the ability to strain. So even though there's probably an optimal window by which you should resume that variation, the truth is you can extend it even longer. Like, you know how many times I maxed out on the raw normal bench In 2021, once. This was 6 months in. 405. I knew it was going to be an instant PR because everything else was constantly going up. So you don't have to go back to test where you're at. You know it went up. And you should be able to tell by your other motions if carryover is taking place. Not only for the max effort, but also the back downs in volume. Because if that's always going up, then you're having some random plus 5, 10 pound PRs with random max effort motions, then progress is guaranteed. Strength is strength, literally, in this situation. So I would not mess with this, even though you probably will get good gains because you technically have 4 weeks. The fact that you're increasing the frequency also means the same repetitive joint stresses. And so the only time you can really get away with this with higher percentages is when you're changing the rep range. Then it's fine. And that's what Jim Wendler figured out actually with 531. That's what many powerlifters do with 80%, 85%, 90%. You can wave it up, but you don't keep that same percentage all the time unless you're changing the variation. Like, this is the only way this is going to work. Or else prepare to get hurt, or accept the fact that you're not even using the max effort method. You're just doing sub-maximal singles. And that's a different strategy. So when you see some powerlifters saying, yeah, I did a single at RPE 8, I'll just point this out. Many times it's not even RPE 8. It's like a 7. I can tell. Or if it's not that, okay, great, but it's RPE 8. That's the whole point. You had a lot more left in the tank. So you just primed yourself for technique purposes. It wasn't a major strain. It's not going to affect you like straining your life away. You're about to have a freaking aneurysm. There's a big difference between the two. So what I'm saying is, if using the max effort method, not a submaximal single, then it's got to be longer than 3-week waves. 5 to 8 weeks, every 3 months. The less you keep them back in, the better your gains will be. That's why the more variation, the better. Bands, chains, Swiss bar, straight bar. The worst thing you could do is keep it super basic with max effort specifically. The raw accessories, yeah, you can milk that for weeks and even months at a time. Like when I was doing my seated anterior delt press, I barely had to rotate it. But when I'm going balls to the wall, max effort method, you have to. You literally have to. This is the most important thing I can ever stress for someone who wants to train this way. 3-week waves, you do that for dynamic effort, you do for volume, not one rep max grinders. Hell no. No, no, no. You don't do it. Even if it works very effectively, you are playing with fire at that point, and the longevity will not be there. Alex, what are your thoughts on the new range of motion rules for bench and competition? I don't compete in the IPF. I'm not a powerlifter. It makes no difference to me. But do I think it's good that they implemented something to stop those extreme, wide grip, maximally arched, contortionist, fake bench presses? Yes. All applauds, because I find it extremely insulting as a legit 405 bencher. Obviously, not in competition, so I'm not trying to take your records, but as someone who put in the honest work, when I see some skinny using that kind of form and saying that he benches 405, it's like, no, you don't. And the proof is in the pudding. Look at all these guys who had to drop their bench by a significant amount. True color shown. That's not a bench press. I don't have words to describe it. It's not impressive, and I don't care which records were broken, even if the guy was natty. I'm sorry, in that case, and you won't hear me saying this very often, a steroid user that can bench 405 is more impressive than a natty who's doing that disgusting form. Because that same natty would struggle in the low 300s if he did it right, which is exactly what we're seeing. Y'all were never elite. And I'm also seeing this with dumbbell pressing, by the way. You have some of these guys using Olympic dumbbells with competition plates on them. What the f***? Bro, if you're gonna do that, you get 10-pound plates. This way, it's the same diameter. I don't care that those big plates are touching your chest. Look at the elbow bend. It blows my mind how any of these lifters even have the balls to post that on social media. Where is your self-respect? Good, I'm glad the rules got changed because I'm sure it must be a really shitty feeling knowing that you work so hard only to be beaten by some guy who has way less muscle and strength than you, but he has the flexibility to use that ultra specific kind of form. And by the way, those dudes are responsible for a lot of the myths that exist in raw powerlifting. Like the overhead press won't raise your raw bench. Well, one of the reasons is because you don't need your shoulders when you're doing that nonsense. But for guys who use a narrower medium grip, yeah, it actually will help. And I can go on about other variations, but I won't even go there. The point is, a lot of programming ideas have been falsified because that ultra specific fake form. Simply put. And I don't care who I offend. I don't care who comes in the comment section. I don't care who happens to be strong. Like, you may very well be strong. I don't care. You're strong in spite of that technique. When will you be 200 lean? What do you define as lean? Because I can be 181 lean with abs, bicep vein, some definition, not too fluffy, like pretty good. That is a reasonable weight for me. But 200 pounds, I got to put on another 20 pounds of lean tissue? Yeah, I don't know about that. I'm only 5'5". And if you look at even classic physique standards, 185 is the weight limit. Obviously, single digit body fat shredded, but look at guys like Terrence Ruffin on stage. That's what happens when you're on the shorter side. And you compile that with being natty, it's even worse. So, do I think I'll ever be like 12% at 200 pounds? It's rather unlikely, to be honest with you. But is it possible that one day I won't really look fluffy at 200? Yeah. Maybe when I'm 45 years old. Who the hell knows? I'm in this for the long term. One guy I can point out to would be Jeff Alberts. I believe he used to be like 165 on stage. And then decades later, he's in the 180s on stage. That would make sense if you've been doing this for 30 plus years. For me, I've been at this for around 13 years. So double my time frame. Let's say I'm gaining 2 pounds of muscle a year. A lot could happen. And I'm looking at myself right now throughout this cut and it's like, I look good. I'm in the high 160s, but I look like I'm in the low 160s. Like I gained 5 pounds of muscle, maybe a bit more. It's extremely noticeable at this point, and I couldn't be more satisfied. I see my physique changing year after year. Like this talk about hitting your natural potential after 5 years is such a lie. I have defiled that on every possible level and will continue doing so. I don't see any plateaus. Progress is slower, but it's not inexistent. I'm just going to keep grinding. I don't care. I don't think about the win factor. The fact is, I'm in this the rest of my life, as we talked about at the very introduction. So, could I be 185 lean? Yeah, 100%. 190 lean? Yeah, probably. 200? Well, I don't know. It's going to be a grind for that, you know? And I think in the end, like, if I want to be on stage, I'd weigh something similar to Alberto Nunez, you know? But again, I got to do more competitions to figure out and be able to compare pictures and stuff, you know? So I can only speak on being like in the 12 to 15 range at the moment. So a lot of you just got to be a bit more realistic. If I do cheat rows or power shrugs using the Smith machine rather than barbell, will there be a big difference in terms of effectiveness to get that stimulus for my traps? Maybe a little bit, just because with a barbell, when you row, there's a natural tendency to bring it towards your hips. So the bar is not moving in a straight up and down vertical line. It's actually coming in at an angle, and therefore could be slightly more lat bias as opposed to upper back. By keeping it higher up, let's say you're pulling towards the chest, it's going to stay there 100% of the time. That's what we're talking about, manipulating the arm path itself. In terms of stability, I don't think it makes a big difference, just because you're still limited by your bracing, the spinal erector strength, you being able to contract, being bent forward. So I would say hypertrophy wise, the gains will be essentially the same. I wouldn't even think about this. That said, for the shrug, it is a different story completely, because you can now overload without this bar hitting your balls. And that is by far the number one con of barbell shrugs. And it is the single reason why I don't do them. If I'm upright trying to overload, I'm going to hit that area all the time, and it's extremely uncomfortable. So you have to lean forward, do somewhat of a little hinge, which actually might even be better for upper traps, but you can't really go as heavy that way. And no one likes shrugging in that position. Let's keep it real. It's also more unstable. It's why we naturally gravitate towards the trap bar. Now you're open, everything is out of the way, boom. Or even if you're doing it strictly, you don't even need the freaking leg drive. If you got something down there, it's going to be an issue. Whereas with the Smith machine, bro, you can take a couple of steps back. It's out of the way, but you're maintaining that upright posture. Or you can flip it around, do the Lee Haney kind of shrug. And you're not going to hit your butt either. So now you have something that's way more stable that won't be hitting your body. So for shrugs, we can definitely make a strong case for the Smith machine. For rows, not really in my opinion. Do you think 8 sets of lateral raising a week is enough to build big side delts for someone that's in the intermediate stage? It's more than enough, including for elite lifters, in my opinion. Like if I want to build the biggest side delts imaginable, that's exactly what I would do, as a matter of fact. I would train them twice a week, 2 sets per exercise, done to failure. So day 1, I might hit some dumbbell lateral raises, followed by cable lateral raises. Day 2, little variations of those for a total of 8 sets a week. Combined with 2 to 4 sets of overhead press a week, compounded with all your other presses. If you get strong, there's no way you're going to have small delts. And we can even take it to the extreme that you can build huge side delts with 0 side delt isolation. Just get your OHP to 200 pounds for reps, which is realistic as a natural, and you'll see. It might not be optimal if you only do that, but you'll get extremely far. Building the majority of your mass, yes, the OHP does stimulate the side delts. They have good leverage. EMG has shown this to be true as well. It's what I did. And I'm not really seeing a big difference by including these lateral raises, but I'm still going to do them, right? But you don't need a lot. How do I use aggressive leg drive without my butt popping off the bench? There's so many ways to do this, but you first have to figure out, are you a flat foot or a tippy toe bencher? For me personally, if I have my feet out in front, wide and flat, I don't get the best leg drive. I have to bring them all the way back such that I'm no longer flat. And my legs also end up close together and highly bent. And then what really helped, because I used to have the problem of my butt coming off, is to squeeze the bench with your thighs. So your adductors, man, you want to press that tight into the bench, and that's really going to maximize your overall stability. Couple that with Alan Thrall's bench press tutorial on leg drive, and you are set. Because I can tell you for a fact, it is the best tutorial on YouTube. And I have seen most of them pertain to the grades of back then. Like, trust me, you need to watch that video. I'm going to post it right here. What he was essentially describing is leg driving yourself into the arch rather than doing it the other way around, which is how most people do it. Just watch it. It's going to change your life forever. Mark my words. So leg drive can be figured out within one training session. I'm 155 pounds and was doing dumbbell skullcrushers with 50s for 8 to 10 reps. Felt great, got 8 on the right arm and 7 on the left, but felt like my triceps twisted and kind of tore. No bruising and can still extend my arm over my head, but after a week I still have tenderness in the middle of my muscle belly. What do you think I did? Maybe you did get a low-grade muscle tear, because I have one simple question for you. Are you a 405 bencher at 155? Do you consider yourself to be stronger than me? Because if you're doing the 50s on a dumbbell skull crusher, full range of motion, strict, you must have enormous arms with an elite bench. Like, I can do the 45s with strict form, 40s, not a problem, but 50s properly, that is some serious, serious work. So I can only conclude, my friend, especially at your body weight, that you're using a rollback, throwing kind of form. And as a result, you did not have the tissue capacity to properly handle that. And you know what? We have seen this with other guys. Usually they tend to be enhanced, or they're going like way heavier than you, but still, it is a thing. You're getting a maximum stretch, especially when you kick it back aggressively, you know? I'm sorry you have to deal with that, but it sounds like a classic case of ego lifting. Or maybe it's the only movement you've done for so long? You hyper specialize on the dumbbell extension, and maybe it's the only extension you're good at, but you're weak at everything else? I don't know. It's hard to say without seeing everything, and even videos, that would be helpful as well. But it just sounds like you went way too heavy and didn't use good form, while at the same time experiencing overuse. So my advice is to go see a doctor ASAP. If it is a tear, you're in big trouble. And after that point, man, drop it back down to the 30s or 35s. Use a controlled tempo. Hold it at the bottom for a second or two, and then extend in a strict way. Don't let those shoulders roll like this. Just boom. You extend like that, you're not going to get injured. Okay, final question. Alex, if you have the space, would you consider getting a functional trainer with some attachments, or are rings and the rest of your equipment just enough for your training goals? I'm building my home gym and want some opinions about cable machines. See, if I had the additional space, that would probably be the final item to complete this wonderful home gym that I'm about 90% satisfied with. There's just a few things here and there, spoiled. You always want the best. But the thing is, I do have a cable setup, 2 of these, and I can hit any exercise for the most part. If I put it high up on top of my power rack, I can do my tricep push downs, lat pull downs, pullovers, chest flies. Then if I set it at the bottom of my power rack, I can do cable curls alongside all the other stuff that people love to do. The only con is I'm stuck in 2 positions, the extreme bottom and the extreme top. I can't get all those in-betweens. I mean, I suppose if I would use a longer strap, I can maneuver it, but that's a bit of a pain in terms of standardization. And the other thing is I'm limited to 1, right? So I don't have dual setups on each side with the micro adjustment. So it is, in fact, a compromise, which is not surprising. Let's be honest. This is designed to cover your fundamentals. So you're saving thousands of dollars in the process, and space, which is important to me. Now, one thing I want to mention is that I actually do have a cable setup sitting in my closet. It is designed for this power rack. It has the low row and lat pull down attachment. So everything I do with this current ghetto setup can be mimicked right in the back. So then, you might be wondering, why did I not install it? Simply put, I did it for you to make it more difficult to film. I don't want this perfect setup in terms of getting my camera everywhere with my tripod, low, high. I don't want to compromise my angles and viewing experience, make it look all cluttery and unprofessional just to make my life a bit easier. As much as it is tempting, because all I gotta do is clip it in the back, move this rack a bit more forward, I'm not gonna do it right away. When I get out of this place, I will. So that is what I personally chose to get, and it's what I'm going to recommend for a lot of you who want slightly more speed compared to the getaway. You get 2 of the most important positions, and that'll serve you for a long time. And then if you want the functional trainer, that's obviously the next best thing, which you can find on Bells of Steel. Everything I'm talking about today, Bells of Steel, link in the description box. So now you get access to dual cables, which completely changes your exercise selection. And what's cool about doing it at home is that you won't be waiting around, because nowadays you go to a commercial gym, everyone is hogging the functional trainer. It is by far the most popular piece of equipment. So you can't even get a workout there. And you also feel like a douche bringing a bench there to do basic movements. Especially if it's on the other side of the gym, at least in mine. I don't know what your gym looks like, but it'd be nice to have something that's really fast to set up, while at the same time giving you even more training options. But it is a luxury, and you gotta have the space for it, which I currently do not have. What I would tell you, my friend, is to first and foremost get a basic ghetto attachment. See if you like that. It's not gonna cost you much, and if you realize that cables are gonna be an important part of your training when you're at home, you're not just gonna be a barbell dumbbell guy, and you have the space that do that back setup, I would go with that first. Otherwise, functional trainer, I mean, that's maxed out level. You can't really get better than that. So It's up to you. But you see what I built, you see what I'm doing on a weekly basis. Things seem to be pretty good with a low profile single cable, which is what I typically use. Not even my second one at the bottom. I just keep it one position at the top and I'm good to go for the majority of my workouts. So you got to figure out what is appropriate for you. And with that said, guys, not much else to say for this Q&A. Hope you enjoyed it. Let's see some more questions down below and I'll talk to you all in the next one.